This is Stefan Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com. Recently there was a shooting of Congresswoman Giffords and other people in Arizona, and we've talked about that event, but let me talk a little bit more about the discussion that has followed that event in terms of gun ownership, gun control, and so on. I think the crucial discussion here is that, number one, in the United States, there will not be a prohibition on guns or ammunition in my lifetime, and not in your lifetime either. The United States is a country where the tradition of owning guns, shooting guns, collecting guns, hunting with guns, competing in contests with guns, and having them for personal protection is so deeply rooted and protected by the Constitution, because the courts have now ruled that the right to bear arms, the Second Amendment, actually applies to us, to individuals. So let's put that one aside. Americans like guns, own guns, trade guns, and they're part of American culture. The question that I think is being discussed is whether that should be an unlimited condition, or whether American society at the local, state level, maybe even at the federal level, has the right to make some decisions about who actually should own guns and carry guns. One thing that we know is we don't want kids to own guns. We're sitting here in front of a bookcase of children's books, and we have passed laws that try to protect children from inappropriate access to firearms. Kids can go hunting with their parents. There are all kinds of classes that you can have your kids take, but we don't want kids going into gun stores and down to the fairgrounds to a gun fair and buy firearms. And in fact, we have little locks that you are required to put on your weapon so that it is protected in most cases. And we have made that decision. And everybody seems to agree that that is a smart decision, because the number of accidental injuries and deaths from children gaining access to firearms is not a good thing, and it has to come down more than it is now. The next question is whether there are any other categories of individuals that we as a society, not interest groups, not the National Rifle Association or others, but we as a country would like to keep away from firearms and would like to disarm. I think the answer for most people is that you yourself, for example, can probably come up with 2 or 3 categories of individuals whom you think and your neighbors think should not have access to guns. Terrorists in the United States should not have access to guns, and we ought to have some way of keeping them away from them. I think you will agree that people who are deeply mentally disturbed probably should not have access to firearms either. And I think eventually we'll know more, but I think the case in Arizona seems to indicate that the individual who shot Congresswoman Giffords and other people was very mentally disturbed. That was also the case with the Virginia Tech shootings and others. And so I think we can reach a consensus that we would like to protect our communities from people who are mentally disturbed by not allowing them access to firearms. And I cannot for the life of me understand why politically people want to essentially avoid even having that particular conversation. I'm a member of the National Rifle Association. I enjoy shooting firearms, and my father and I used to spend weekends at our ranch in the Andes Mountains shooting at targets, and we went hunting as well. So I am not an opponent to gun ownership. But I think most of us do think that society has a right to protect itself from certain categories of people, and therefore the industry should essentially sit down and understand that you can have reasonable and smart rules about who can and can't buy guns and ammunition without that becoming the sort of, the finger that then you go for the hand and then you go for the whole arm, the beginning of disarming the American population. I just don't think that's true. And so what has happened after the shootings in Arizona is I find a lot of people are talking about guns and how we should manage those as American citizens. Think about it, talk about it with your neighbors, and see what you come up with. This is Stefan Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com.